She changed the locks while I was gone. Just like that. No warning, no call, no explanation. I stood on my porch, turning the key that no longer fit, listening to the quiet click of a deadbolt that answered more loudly than any words could. That lock said, "You're not welcome." That lock said, "This is no longer your home." But it was mine. God help me, it was still mine. The air was colder than I expected for late April. I'd only taken a weekend trip to Stillwater to visit my oldest friend, Clara. She'd had a rough winter, lost her sister, caught pneumonia, nearly gave up. She needed me. And I, though I didn't admit it then, needed the break. A few nights of sleep without footsteps above me, without that sharp perfume of Celeste in every hallway, without feeling like a stranger in the house I paid off 23 years ago. I'd called before I left. I'd left a note on the kitchen counter, too. "Back Sunday by noon. Take care. N." Nothing dramatic, just what a person says when she assumes she's still considered family, still has a place at the table, still owns the walls around her. I tried the key again. Same result. At first, I thought maybe there'd been a break-in. Maybe someone had changed the lock for safety. But then I noticed the tiny white sticker near the handle, barely visible in the morning light. Seculock Installations, Friday, 3:15 p.m. Friday, the day after I left. Not even a full 24 hours. I pressed the doorbell and waited. Nothing. Knocked, then rang again. Still nothing. My old hydrangeas, trimmed back by someone who clearly didn't understand them, stood like small skeletons by the porch steps. My mailbox still had the dent in the side from where Alex hit it with a wiffle bat in 1991. The welcome mat, crooked, muddy, still read, "Home Sweet Home." Home. I took a step back, looked at the windows. Curtains closed. Silence inside. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. I dialed Alex. It rang 4 times, then voicemail. "Alex, it's Mom. I'm back from Clara's. I can't get in. The locks have been changed. I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. Call me, please." I hung up and waited. For 5 minutes. Then 10. Then I called again. Still nothing. After 20 minutes in the driveway, sitting in my old Civic, hands shaking not from cold but from disbelief, I drove around the block, just in case. Maybe Alex had gone out for milk. Maybe Celeste had gone to the gym. Maybe this was all a mistake. But it wasn't. Because when I circled back, their car was in the driveway. The sleek black Lexus I'd helped them with when they hit a tight patch 2 years ago. Parked neatly on the same driveway my husband Jack and I laid with our own hands the summer after we paid off the mortgage. I got out again. Knocked again. Rang again. Nothing. It was then, standing there in the wind, that it hit me. Not all at once. Not like a slap. But like cold water slowly creeping into your bones. This wasn't an accident. This was a decision. A boundary drawn by someone else in a house that was still legally and spiritually mine. I didn't cry. I wish I could tell you I did. That it all poured out in one clean, cathartic sob. But no. I stood still, let the hurt settle quietly like dust, and got back in my car. I parked 2 blocks down. I didn't know where else to go. Clara was 2 hours away. I didn't want to explain it yet. I didn't want anyone's voice telling me, "You have to fight this." Or worse, "I told you they'd try something like this." I needed time to think. That evening, I slept in the driver's seat, or tried to. My knees stiffened, my neck cramped. My bladder woke me at 2 a.m., and I had to find a 24-hour gas station to use the restroom. I bought a coffee I didn't want, just to not feel like a loiterer. The cashier, a boy no older than my grandson would be, smiled kindly. I nearly burst into tears right there, just because someone saw me. By 6 a.m., I was parked again near the house. The sky was bruised pink and orange. Dew clung to the grass. And then the lights inside turned on. I watched through the windshield as Celeste stepped out onto the porch in a silk robe, sipping from the mug I got her last Christmas, the one that said Queen Bee. She glanced at the lawn, then back at the door, and disappeared inside. That was all I needed to see. Not rage, not even sadness, just finality and clarity. I drove away without touching my phone, but I knew what I was going to do. The house had never been big. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, low ceilings, popcorn walls I never got around to scraping, but it held more life than most mansions I'd ever seen. We bought it in 1974, Jack and I, with barely enough for a down payment and a toddler on my hip. It had avocado green appliances and rust in the tub, but the backyard faced west, and the maple in the front yard lit up gold every fall. That was enough for me. Jack died on the porch. I don't mean that poetically. He died there, on a Tuesday, during his second cup of coffee. The Tribune folded in his lap just before 9 May. I came out with a piece of toast in one hand and my reading glasses in the other. By the time I noticed something was wrong, it was already too late. That was 12 years ago. I've lived alone since. Not because I wanted to, but because that's how it worked out. At first, I expected Alex would check in more. He did, for a while. Dinners every few weeks, sometimes with that eager tone in his voice like he'd remembered something important. Then came the promotion, the commute, the shift in tone. He married Celeste 3 years after Jack passed. A woman with sharp cheekbones, sharper words, and a job title that changed every quarter. She worked in branding, which seemed to involve a lot of slideshows and telling people how to make themselves look more expensive. She didn't like the house. That much was clear from the beginning. Said the kitchen was closed concept, said the floors creaked like a horror movie, said the place smelled like old fabric. She meant me. The first few years they lived in a sleek loft downtown, all chrome and echo. But when Alex's company downsized and Celeste's freelance contracts dried up, they needed a bridge. That was the word Alex used when he called. Just until we figure out our next move, Mom. A few weeks, maybe a couple months. I hesitated. I did. But then he said, it'd really help us out. And that was all it took. He could have asked me to sleep on nails and I'd have gotten the hammer ready. They moved in on a Sunday. 4 suitcases, 2 garment bags, a flat screen I didn't have a wall for. Celeste didn't speak to me much that day. She was too busy directing Alex, where to put her desk, where to set the box with her air purifier, which room needed to be depersonalized first. That meant my photos, my quilt. The doilies Clara crocheted for me last Christmas. I watched her stack them in a box without asking. She didn't even look at me. Later that evening, I found my wedding album in the hall closet. It had been on the sideboard next to the lamp for 20 years. Alex apologized. Sort of. She's just trying to make it feel livable, he said, scratching the back of his neck. It was already livable, I said. He smiled tightly. Yeah, but, modern. That was the start. In the first week, they rearranged the living room. In the second, they replaced my coffee maker. By the third, I no longer kept milk in the fridge because Celeste was plant-based and said the smell bothered her. I began to feel like a tenant in my own house. No, not even a tenant. A guest. She called me Nancy, not Mom. Not even Mrs. Tanner. Just Nancy. Like I was the neighbor who let the dog bark too long. When I brought it up to Alex, he waved it off. She's not big on formality. It's not formality, I said. It's family. But the truth was, I'd let them stay. I'd made space. I'd cooked. I'd cleaned. I'd turned down the thermostat because Celeste got migraines from dry heat. I stopped watching my mystery shows in the evening because she liked silence to meditate. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would bring Alex closer, that we'd find a rhythm. But mostly, I just found myself tiptoeing from room to room, carrying my quiet like a tray I was scared to drop. I remember the night I overheard them talking in the kitchen. She keeps leaving dishes in the sink, Celeste whispered. She's used to her own way, Alex mumbled back. It's cluttered. It's bad energy. She's trying. Well, trying's not enough. I stood on the other side of the wall, hands damp with soap, my own words swallowed back like bad medicine. I didn't sleep much after that. But still, I stayed. I thought it was temporary. That soon they'd find their next condo, move on, thank me for my help, and I'd get my home back. The one where I could wear my slippers in the kitchen and leave my puzzle half finished on the table. But time passed. Nothing changed. And then came Clara's call. Her sister gone. Her cough not letting up. Would you come for a few nights? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I looked at the calendar. I looked at the guest towels. I looked at the way my slippers had been shoved under the couch. Of course, I said. I left Friday morning. They changed the locks that afternoon. I raised Alex in that house. He took his first steps in the hallway between the kitchen and the den. Said his first word at the breakfast table. Up. Reaching toward his father with both arms, grinning so wide we thought his face might split. He had a mole behind his left knee I used to kiss every night at bath time. When he was scared of thunderstorms, he'd crawl into our bed and fall asleep, curled against me. Tiny fingers hooked through the sleeve of my nightgown, like an anchor. I didn't forget any of it. But I think, somewhere along the line, he did. Jack used to say, "He's going to break your heart someday, Nancy. That boy's got too much wind in him and not enough roots." I'd laugh, swat him with a dish towel, tell him not to say such things. "He loves us," I'd say. "He loves what we give him," Jack would reply. "One day, you'll see the difference." The first time I saw that difference was the day Alex turned 25 and brought Celeste to Sunday dinner. She didn't offer to help with the dishes. She didn't ask about Jack's garden or the new curtains I'd just sewn. She didn't look at the old photographs on the wall. Instead, she commented on the smell of the roast. Rich was the word she used, though not as a compliment, and asked if we had any kombucha. I remember feeling embarrassed, like my kitchen wasn't clean enough, my food not sophisticated enough. Jack noticed. He caught my eye across the table, gave me that little shake of the head, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. But Alex was smitten. Every time she spoke, he lit up like a boy at a magic show. I didn't say a word. I didn't want to be the mother who judged too fast. I thought maybe she just needed time. She got plenty. They got married in a barn outside Minneapolis. Lavender tablecloths, violin quartet, mason jars hanging from trees like we were all extras in a lifestyle blog. I wore the blue dress I'd saved for something special. Sat next to Jack's empty chair and smiled until my cheeks hurt. They didn't ask for money, not directly. But 2 months before the wedding, Alex came over with a folder and a look he only used when he wanted something. "Just a little help?" he said, to ease the stress. $10,000? I didn't even hesitate. Jack would have called it soft-headedness. I called it motherhood. After the wedding, visits slowed. Calls grew shorter. The tone changed, from warmth to obligation, like checking a box. I'd get an occasional, "Hi, Mom, just wanted to see how you're doing," but there was always a rush behind it. A meeting, a deadline, a bad signal. Then silence. I tried not to mind. Then came the money questions. Short-term squeeze. Unexpected expenses. Freelance work delayed. It started small. Could you cover this month's car insurance? And grew. I paid off one of their credit cards when the interest piled up. I sent grocery money, just in case. I paid their accountant's fees when they filed late taxes. Each time, Alex promised he'd pay me back. Each time, I said he didn't have to. And I meant it. What I didn't say was, I hoped, secretly, that my help would mean something, that maybe it would bring him closer, that maybe, one day, he'd say, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Instead, what I got was this. A lock changed on the home where I taught him to walk. A silent house on a Sunday afternoon. A voicemail that never got returned. And a woman who never wanted me there to begin with. I remember one conversation with Celeste, not long after they moved in. I'd made coffee. She took a cup, sniffed it, and set it down. "I only drink pour-over," she said. I smiled. "I can make tea if you'd rather." She looked me over, that subtle glance women use to measure one another without kindness. "You know, Nancy, no offense, but this place feels stuck." Stuck? Yeah, like frozen in time. "You've lived here how long?" 47 years. Exactly. She smiled like she'd made a point. I looked around. The lace curtains, the worn hardwood, the cross-stitch on the wall that said, "Love grows best in little houses." Yes, maybe it was stuck. But it was mine. I didn't say any of that. Instead, I nodded. "I suppose it does feel that way." What I wanted to say, what I should have said, was, "Of course it feels like time stopped here. Because the best parts of my life happened within these walls, and I never needed anything more." But I held my tongue. Again. Because I didn't want to make things harder for Alex. Because I thought maybe she'd soften. Maybe she'd come around. Maybe she'd see I wasn't a threat. That I only wanted to be treated like a person. Instead, I got locked out like a tenant behind on rent. And the worst part wasn't that she did it. It was that he let her. The first night they moved in, I made a lasagna. It's silly what sticks with you. How much cheese you used, what time you pulled it from the oven, how you set the table with cloth napkins like it was Sunday, even though it was Tuesday. I even lit a candle. I wanted it to feel like a family again. Celeste took one bite, pushed her plate slightly away, and asked if there were gluten-free options. Alex didn't say anything, just poured her a glass of water and started talking about the stock market, like nothing had happened. That should have been my sign. But when your child moves back in, no matter how grown they are, a part of you thinks it's a second chance. A chance to be needed again, to sit with them at breakfast, to hear about their day, even if it's only for a while. "It's just temporary," Alex kept saying, "until we figure things out." But temporary stretched into weeks, and weeks into months. And bit by bit, the lines of who belonged where started to blur, and then disappear entirely. At first, I moved my things to make space. I cleared 2 drawers in the guest room, thinking it polite. Then they asked if they could use the master bedroom. Just for a while, Mom. The light's better in there and it's closer to the bathroom. I agreed. It was the room where Jack and I had spent 38 years, but I didn't make a fuss. I told myself it didn't matter. Told myself it was just walls. Next, it was the pantry. Then the closet. Then the bookshelf. Celeste had books with white covers and gold letters. Minimalist, she called them. Mine were dog-eared, with spines cracked from love. She asked if we could tuck those away. Which ones? Just the ones that don't match the aesthetic. She meant all of them. I boxed them up and put them in the attic. The kitchen followed. My red kettle was too loud, my baking tins cluttered. She brought in a blender that looked like a spaceship and cleared the counter of everything else. I found my utensils in a box labeled Donate. Still, I said nothing. There was a moment I'll never forget. Small, quick, a pinprick that kept bleeding. I walked into the living room one morning with my cup of tea, and Celeste was already there, stretched across the sofa in leggings and a robe. She didn't look up. "Do you mind knocking?" she said. "Knocking?" "Before entering. This is the living room." "I know," she said, flicking through her phone, "but I'm meditating." I stood there, blinking, the heat from my tea fading fast. That night, I started keeping to my bedroom. I told myself it was easier. I read in bed, ate quietly. Even started watching my mystery shows on my tablet with headphones. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a place I was borrowing, and badly. Once I left my slippers by the couch. The next morning, they were by the front door, neatly lined up, as if waiting to be taken away. Another time, I made oatmeal in the kitchen at 7 a.m., something I'd done every day for years. Celeste came down the stairs and wrinkled her nose. "I really need silence in the mornings," she said. "It's part of my wellness practice." I almost laughed, but I didn't. I apologized. To her. In my own kitchen. She started organizing the mail, too. Alex let her. One day I noticed my pension statement had been opened. She shrugged when I asked about it. "I assumed it was something we should keep track of," she said. "We," as if we were all one household, except I wasn't counted. I was something to be managed. An old clock in the hallway, nostalgic, but in the way. The only time she ever smiled at me genuinely was when I said I might go stay with Clara for a few days. "Oh, that would be lovely," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Get some fresh air, right? Change of scenery? Clara's that friend with the lake house?" "No lake," I said. "Just a 2-bedroom in Stillwater." Still, she beamed like I'd offered her a holiday package. I told Alex the same thing, more out of politeness than hope. He said, "That's nice, Mom." Already halfway into an email. The morning I packed my bag, Celeste offered to drive me to the station. I declined. She hugged me anyway, lightly, politely. "Take your time," she said. I didn't know what she meant until I came back. And the lock no longer turned. The first thing I noticed when they moved in wasn't the noise or the clutter. It was the absence of consideration. You can feel it when it leaves a house. It's like warmth that slips out through a draft. Slowly enough that at first, you just put on a sweater. And then one day you realize you've been freezing for weeks. It started with the little things. My armchair, Jack's old recliner, the one with the patched leather and a groove from his left elbow, suddenly disappeared from the living room. "I had it moved to the garage," Celeste said. "It didn't fit the layout." "No one asked me," I replied. She tilted her head and smiled like a nurse indulging a confused patient. "Oh." I thought it was obvious. We needed space. We. Then came the rugs. My thick braided rug in the entryway was a tripping hazard. The bathroom mat with faded sunflowers? Unsanitary. Bit by bit, my home became a showroom. Every decision was made around me, not with me. I was the old fixture in the corner, a houseplant they didn't water but couldn't throw out just yet. I tried to speak with Alex, more than once. The first time, he was on his laptop. I waited until he looked up, eyes tired, mouth pressed into a flat line. "Alex," I began, "can we talk about how things are going? I feel like, well, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells." He gave a short sigh. "Mom, it's just a lot right now. We're trying to stay afloat, and you're making it personal." "I am personal. This is my house." He closed his laptop a little too hard. "And we're grateful. But do you know how stressful this has been for Celeste? She's used to structure, order. She's trying to make this work. By removing me from the picture?" I didn't say that. I just nodded, lips tight. The second time, I tried again. "I need you to understand something," I said, sitting across from him at the dining table. "I'm not a guest here." He didn't look at me. "I live here," I continued. "This is my home. Yours too, in a way. But I won't be treated like an intruder in it." "Then don't act like one," came a voice from the kitchen. Celeste didn't even look up from rinsing her juicer. She said it casually, like a throwaway comment on the weather. I stood there, stunned. And Alex, he didn't correct her, didn't defend me. Just shifted in his seat and muttered, "Let's all just calm down." Calm down. The two words people always use to shut women up. That night, I cried in my room. Not loud, not dramatically. Just the kind of quiet, worn-out weeping you do when you realize no one's coming to fix it. I almost called Clara, but I didn't want to be pitied. Didn't want to say it out loud. They're erasing me. I noticed it in the refrigerator too. My pickles gone. My yogurt replaced by glass jars filled with strange seeds. My name not on anything, because I wasn't sure I was allowed to label food in my own kitchen. When I dared to put a casserole dish in the oven on a Saturday, Celeste walked in, sniffed, and said, "Is that meat?" "Yes." She made a face. "Could you maybe do that when I'm not home? I'm really sensitive to animal smells." I opened my mouth to reply, but Alex beat me to it. "Come on, Mom. You know she's trying to stay plant-based." "I'm trying to stay sane," I said. He didn't laugh. Eventually, I began going to bed earlier just to avoid the tension. I used to stay up late, read on the couch with a blanket and a biscuit. Now, I disappeared by 80. It was around that time I noticed the mail came opened. Not always, but often. Especially anything from the bank. I confronted Alex gently. "I noticed my bank statement was opened," I said. "Oh, that? Must have been a mix-up. We're getting a lot of stuff right now." "But it was clearly addressed to me." He waved a hand. "Don't worry about it, Mom." I started keeping my financial papers in a box in my closet. I suppose I could have drawn a harder line earlier, raised my voice, set rules. But part of me still believed that if I just waited long enough, he'd remember. Remember who I was to him, what I'd done for him, how many nights I stayed up with him when he had asthma, how I skipped meals so he could have lunch money. Instead, he told me to not take things so personally. And then, one morning, I overheard something from the hallway, something not meant for me. Celeste, speaking low on the phone. "She won't be here next week. I'll get the locksmith in on Friday." Pause. No, she won't fight it. She's too passive. Another pause. I just want this house to feel like ours already. I stood frozen, breath shallow, my heart pounding like it was trying to warn me. You heard right. That afternoon, I packed my overnight bag for Stillwater. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because they thought they knew me. But they didn't know who they'd locked out. Not yet. It happened 2 days before I was set to return. Clara's cough had softened, the color in her face slowly coming back. We sat on her porch drinking weak coffee and watching the squirrels dart across the yard. She talked about her sister's memorial, about old hymns and who'd shown up dressed too casually. I listened. I nodded. But my mind kept drifting back to St. Paul, to the maple tree in front of my house, to the sound of my floors under feet that weren't mine. I'd been gone 5 days. I left behind a stocked fridge, folded towels, and a note with my return date. No threats, no warnings, no locked doors. But they hadn't waited. They hadn't even called. I didn't say anything to Clara. Not at first. But that night, over dinner, I let it slip. I think they're planning to change the locks while I'm gone, I said, carefully buttering my bread. My voice was steady, but my chest felt tight. Clara paused, knife midair. You think? I heard her on the phone. Clara put her knife down slowly. Nancy. It's fine, I said quickly, as if by saying it fast enough I could make it true. I'm sure it's just talk. She gets dramatic. Your son's wife is dramatic. Your son is not. If he goes along with this, he's not ignorant. He's complicit. That word hit hard. Complicit. We didn't speak for a while. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was old, worn in, like comfortable shoes. You're going back Sunday? She finally asked. I nodded. Before noon. She didn't push. She just passed me the salad and asked if I wanted more vinaigrette. That's what real friends do. I woke early Sunday, heart already racing. The drive was 2 hours, but I made it in 90 minutes, my fingers clenched tight around the wheel. I pulled into the neighborhood and noticed nothing had changed. Same cars on the street, same wind chimes down the block, the same red tulips pushing through the earth in Mrs. Kaminsky's yard. And then I saw it. My house. And the sign. Secu-Lock Installations, Friday, 3:15 p.m. The door handle gleamed, new, silver, wrong. I stepped onto the porch, my key in hand, and turned it. Nothing. It didn't even budge. At first I felt disbelief, then confusion, then something worse. Calm. Not the good kind. The kind that creeps in when your body's too tired to panic. When your brain starts sorting the betrayal into little folders, trying to label them quickly enough to stay upright. I knocked. No answer. I rang. No answer. Their car was in the driveway. I was locked out of my home, and they were inside. I stood there for several minutes, just listening for footsteps, the creak of the stairs, maybe even laughter. But the house was silent. Still. I walked back to my car and sat behind the wheel, not ready to drive. I checked my phone, no calls, no texts. I tried Alex, straight to voicemail. I didn't cry. Not even a single tear. I just stared out the windshield, remembering the first time Jack and I saw this house. We were both in our 20s, Alex still in diapers. The real estate agent had said, "It's a little outdated, but with the right touch." And Jack had laughed and said, "We're the right touch." We were. We made that house a home. And now I wasn't even welcomed across the threshold. At 6 p.m., when the sun dipped low and the porch light flickered on automatically, I drove away. But not far. I parked 2 blocks down. I slept in the car that night, wrapped in the old travel blanket I kept in the back seat, a bottle of water by my side. I used the gas station bathroom in the early hours and bought a coffee just so they wouldn't ask questions. The clerk looked at me kindly. I must have looked like something out of a story he didn't want to hear. At dawn, I pulled around the corner and parked where I could see the house. That's when I saw her, Celeste. Stepping outside in her silk robe, holding the mug I gave her last Christmas, the one that said Queen Bee. She didn't see me, but I saw her. She paused on the porch, sipped, glanced at the sky like she owned it, then turned back inside. And something inside me shifted, not snapped, not broke, shifted, like a plate of earth settling into a new place after years of pressure. I didn't honk, didn't call out. I just put the car in gear and drove away. But this time, I wasn't running. I was going to fix what she broke, and I was going to do it on my own terms. The locksmith's name was Ernie, and he used to fix our screen doors back in the day. Short man, always wore suspenders, and smelled like pipe tobacco even after he quit. Jack liked him, said he charged fair, and never asked unnecessary questions. That's exactly what I needed. I found his number scribbled in the back of an old address book between Linda pie crust recipe and pediatrician Dr. Cohen, retired. I didn't think he still worked. I certainly didn't expect him to pick up, but he did. Ernie speaking? Hi, it's Nancy Tanner. Silence, then a warm chuckle. Well, I'll be. How's Jack? Gone 12 years now. He went quiet a moment. Sorry to hear that. He was a good one. He was. What can I do for you, Nancy? I swallowed hard. I need locks changed. He didn't ask why, just asked when. Today, I said. Early. I'll be there at 7 sharp. I gave him the address. I didn't say my house. I didn't have to. I parked 3 blocks away and walked up just before 7. The morning air was crisp. The grass was damp. My knees ached like they always did when the weather turned, but I stood tall. Ernie was already waiting by the porch, toolbox in hand. Looks different, he said, nodding at the new handle. Not your style. It's not, I replied. He didn't smile, just went to work. I stood beside him, arms crossed, as he removed the sleek, modern hardware, clean, soulless, like everything Celeste touched, and replaced it with a brass deadbolt that clicked with weight and memory. When he was done, he handed me 2 new keys. You want a third? No, 2's enough. He packed up his tools, then looked at me with something between curiosity and respect. You all right, Nancy? I met his eyes. I am now. He nodded once and walked to his truck. At 7:32 a.m., I opened the front door to my own house and stepped inside. It smelled different. Lavender detergent. Something floral and expensive. My photos were still missing from the sideboard. The blanket I crocheted last winter was folded neatly on the armchair, as if it had been placed there just for looks, not for warmth. But the floor still creaked under my step. The clock above the fridge still ticked half a beat too slow. The sun still lit the east wall of the kitchen like a quiet promise. I went into the master bedroom. They'd changed everything. My quilt, gone. My lace curtains, replaced with beige blackout panels. A diffuser sat on my nightstand, puffing out some kind of mist. I unplugged it. Then I went to the closet. My clothes were boxed, labeled. Seasonal, donate. I carried each box out to the garage, brought in my own. It took 2 hours to set things back as they were. Not perfectly, just enough. Then I turned to the spare room. Celeste's shoes lined the baseboard like little soldiers. Her suitcases, leather, monogrammed, sat at the foot of the bed. Her silk robe hung on the door. One by one, I carried everything out to the lawn. Not thrown, not dumped, placed, folded where needed, lined up neatly along the edge of the porch like a display window. By the time I finished, the sun was higher in the sky. A jogger slowed as he passed, eyebrows raised. I gave a small wave. He waved back. I went inside and brewed tea, my tea, from the tin I kept hidden behind the cereal boxes. I sat in the kitchen, steam rising from my cup, and waited. At 9:11, the doorknob rattled. Then came the knock. Sharp, impatient. "Nancy!" Celeste's voice was high, thin. "There's something wrong with the lock." I sipped. More knocking. Harder now. "Nancy, open the door. Why are my things on the lawn?" I didn't move. Then came the voice I'd once lived for. "Mom?" "Alex." "Are you inside?" I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. His face was pale. Her face was red. I looked at them both, then down at the bags. "They're not on the lawn," I said quietly. "They're on my lawn." "Nancy," Celeste started, "this is completely uncalled for." I looked at her, long and flat. "So is changing the locks on someone else's house." "It was a misunderstanding," Alex said quickly, stepping forward. "No," I said. "It wasn't." He stopped, looked at me like he was seeing something new. "You locked me out of my home?" I said. "You didn't call. You didn't warn me. You left me outside like a stray animal." Silence. "And you," I added, turning to Celeste, "planned it days in advance." "I didn't think you'd make a scene," she muttered. "I'm not," I replied. "This isn't a scene, it's a boundary." Alex reached for the doorknob. I stepped aside, but didn't move from the frame. "You can come in," I said, "to collect anything else you need." He stared at me. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." They didn't speak for a moment, not with words, anyway, but their faces said plenty. Celeste looked like someone who'd bitten into something unexpectedly bitter. She stood on the porch with her arms crossed, expensive sunglasses perched on her head, her shoes in perfect contrast to the cracked concrete. She wasn't used to being spoken to like this, especially not by someone she thought she'd written off. Alex looked worse, not angry, confused, as if the ground under him had shifted an inch, just enough to rattle the teacup of his composure. "Mom," he said, voice low, "you're overreacting." I nodded slowly, letting that word land. Not fight it. Not flare up. "That's the word you're going with?" He blinked. "You locked me out," I continued. "Without a word. You didn't forget. You didn't miscommunicate. You changed the locks and didn't think I'd come back. That's not—" "It is exactly what happened." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I stayed in my car overnight. At 74 years old. I used a gas station bathroom and drank vending machine coffee, Alex. That's what your silence cost me." He looked down. I don't know if it was guilt or discomfort, but he didn't argue. Beside him, Celeste shifted. "I didn't think you'd return so early," she said flatly. "You said Sunday, but not when." "I said noon." She shrugged like that excused everything, like locking a woman out of her home was a matter of calendar management. I moved from the doorway, but didn't step aside fully. "You can come in now," I repeated. "Get what you need." "Where are we supposed to stay?" Alex asked. I raised my eyebrows. "You didn't seem worried about where I'd sleep." "That's not the same," he snapped, his voice finally cracking. "You have this place." "I had this place," I said, my voice even. "Until Friday, when you told someone to erase me from it." "That's not fair." "No," I said. It's not. He hesitated. I didn't. You have 15 minutes. They moved past me without speaking. Celeste walked quickly, brisk heels tapping on the wood floors like gunfire. She made straight for the bedroom, yanked open the closet, and began packing what was left. I watched her fold her silk robe like a hotel staffer, mechanical, cold, not a glance around. Alex lingered in the hallway. I just don't understand why you're being so rigid. I turned toward him slowly. You don't understand why I no longer want people who betrayed me to live in my home? He opened his mouth, then shut it. I invited you in during a hard time, I said. I made space. I gave you warmth. You gave me silence and exclusion. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, do you remember how many times I said I didn't feel like myself anymore? I asked. Like I was disappearing in my own house? He didn't answer. Do you know how many of my things I found in the garage, labeled donate in her handwriting? Still nothing. You said nothing, Alex. Over and over again, that silence, that was your choice. The minutes passed in awkward shuffling and quiet zippers. Celeste barely glanced up as she packed. Her cosmetic bag, her diffuser, her box of supplements, carefully collected like a museum exhibit returning to storage. They came back down the stairs, each with a suitcase in hand. I'll send someone for the rest, she said. You won't, I replied. You'll call, and we'll schedule a time. I'll be here when it happens. You don't trust us? Alex asked. No, I said. Not anymore. Celeste stepped outside first. Alex lingered on the threshold, turning back once more. This isn't how families treat each other. I looked at him for a long time. No, I said softly. It's not. And then I closed the door. Not slammed, not locked behind them in anger. Just closed. I walked back through the house slowly, not inspecting, just absorbing. The silence was different now, not tense, not tight. Still. I made another cup of tea. The windows were open, the breeze light. The house smelled like lavender and coffee and something older, something that had always been mine. At 11 high, my phone rang. Alex. I let it buzz. Let it go to voicemail. Then came the text. Can we talk later? I'm trying to understand all this. It just happened so fast. I didn't reply. Because it didn't happen fast. It happened slowly, over years, over 1,000 small moments when I let myself disappear in order to keep peace that never truly existed. Now, the peace was real, earned, and I had no interest in giving it up again. By noon, the sun had fully claimed the front lawn. Her suitcases were gone. The porch was empty again, no leather bags, no passive-aggressive perfume in the air. Just wind, soft and dry, brushing over the steps where Jack used to drink his Sunday coffee and read the sports section aloud even when no one asked him to. I stood by the window with my tea, watching the space where Celeste's things had sat. The grass was slightly pressed down. Temporary bruises. Nothing that wouldn't spring back by morning. That's the thing no one tells you about houses. They remember. They remember where your baby's bassinet stood, where the Christmas tree leaned just a little to the left every year, where your husband dropped his keys at the exact same spot, even after you moved the hook. They also remember the silences, the cold shoulders, the months when your voice didn't carry through the walls because no one was listening. But they always welcome you back if you choose to return with your spine straight and your dignity intact. The house was quiet, not awkwardly, peacefully. I sat down at the dining table, alone for the first time in weeks, and didn't feel lonely. I felt here, present. It took less than an hour to restore the kitchen, my kettle back in its rightful place, my cookbooks on the counter, open to dog-eared pages, the jar of pickles I'd hidden behind the cleaning products brought back to the fridge shelf where it belonged. I lit the cinnamon candle Clara gave me for my birthday. Celeste had once sneered that it smelled like an airport lounge. I let it burn anyway. I liked it. Around 2 in the afternoon, I opened the box of documents I kept under my bed, the one Celeste never quite dared to touch. It held every important paper from the past 5 decades. Mortgage payoff notice, Jack's death certificate, Alex's birth certificate, and a folder labeled legal. I flipped through the contents until I found what I was looking for. The deed. Still in my name. Still only my name. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing it, even after all these years, like a soft yes whispered by the universe when you most need to hear it. My phone vibrated again. Alex. I think we should talk soon. Things are tense, but maybe we can work through it. I didn't reply. Instead, I searched my contacts for someone I hadn't called in years. Howard Leonard, my lawyer. The last time we spoke was when Jack passed. He handled the probate with quiet efficiency. We never became friends, but he remembered my name without asking twice, and that counted for something. I dialed. Leonard and Westman, came the receptionist's voice. Hi, this is Nancy Tanner. I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Leonard. Do you have a matter in progress? No, I said, but I think it's time I did. The office still smelled like leather and printer ink. Nothing fancy, just shelves of thick books and a clock that ticked a second behind real time. I sat on the same couch I had 12 years ago, after Jack's funeral, with the same nervous fingers locked together in my lap. Howard came out in the same kind of suit, slightly wrinkled, not expensive, but well pressed. His hair had thinned, his glasses thickened, but his eyes were just as sharp. Nancy, he said, offering his hand. It's been a while. It has. Let's catch up. I told him everything. Slowly. Carefully. Not dramatic. Just facts. He listened without interrupting. Only when I finished did he lean back and exhale through his nose. You're not the first, he said quietly. Elder clients who let family in and suddenly find themselves out. But you might be the first who fought back before it was too late. I don't want to be angry, I said. I just want to be clear. I want the house protected. I want my documents updated. I want to make sure I'm never put in this position again. He nodded. We'll revise the will, lock down the property, and set up power of attorney for someone you actually trust. That would be my banker, not my son. No problem, I'll prepare the drafts. And I'll include a letter of notice. To Alex? To both of them. I want it quiet, I said. No threats, just facts. They'll know I'm done. He nodded again. By the time I left the office, the sky was streaked with gold. November sun melting over the city like a quiet apology. I stopped at the grocery store on the way home, bought the good butter, the jam Jack liked. Fresh tulips, even though they never last long this time of year. That night, I ate dinner at the table with the radio on low. No one critiqued the meal. No one opened my mail. No one asked if I'd considered repainting the kitchen something more neutral. I went to bed with the windows open just enough to hear the wind. My phone buzzed once before I fell asleep. Alex. Still hope we can talk soon. I didn't answer. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I didn't tell Clara what happened until 2 days later. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I needed to feel it myself first. To sit in the silence and know it wasn't going to turn on me. To walk from one end of my house to the other without someone sighing behind me. To make toast at 6 in the morning and not feel guilty for the sound. When I called her, she answered on the first ring. "Well?" she asked. No greeting, just that one word, stretched with concern. "They're gone," I said. A beat of silence. "Gone where?" "Don't know, don't care." She let out a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. "You actually did it." "I did." "You changed the locks back?" "Yes." "You put her things on the lawn?" "Every last pair of overpriced shoes." "Oh, honey," she whispered. "You finally stopped asking for permission to be the owner of your own life." I didn't say anything. My throat tightened too fast. "You want me to come over?" she asked. "No, I need to be here alone for a while." She understood. Of course she did. We all reach an age where silence stops being lonely and starts being a shield. After we hung up, I walked through the house with a pad and pen. Not to clean, not to rearrange, but to reclaim. What had been pushed out? What needed fixing? I listed everything that felt off. Curtains still in her style. The coffee table books that didn't belong to me. That sleek, gold-framed mirror near the stairs that never reflected anything true. I made piles. One for donation, one for trash. One for burning, though I didn't follow through. The matches stayed in the drawer. Around noon, I opened the hall closet and saw something that stopped me cold. My wedding album, still boxed, tucked under a stack of neutral throw pillows. I'd almost forgotten what it looked like. I pulled it out gently and sat cross-legged on the rug. The plastic cover was slightly scuffed. The pages smelled faintly of time, dust, paper, air that had been waiting. Jack looked so young, his tie crooked, my veil uneven. We looked nervous and in love and real. There was a photo I'd always liked, us laughing, unposed. Alex was 3, hiding behind my dress. I stared at it longer than the rest. What had I missed? When had the closeness slipped away? Was it always going to turn like this? Or had I handed them the knife one politeness at a time? That evening, there was a knock at the door. Not hard, not rushed. Almost hopeful. I knew who it was before I even stood up. Alex. Through the window I could see him. Alone. No Celeste in sight. Just him, in a jacket too light for the weather, holding something in his hand. A paper bag. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "Hi," he said. "Hi. I brought your favorite. The lemon bars from Carmichael's." I didn't move. "They're fresh. You think dessert's going to fix this?" He winced. "No, I just thought, I don't know. Maybe it'd be a start." He held the bag out. I didn't take it. He let it hang between us like a peace offering carved out of guilt. "I didn't know she was planning to lock you out," he said. "Not until after." "Then why didn't you stop it?" I don't know." I let the silence stretch. "She said you'd overreact," he added. "And you believed her." He looked down at the steps. "I didn't want to lose our place here. You lost it the minute you decided my place in it didn't matter." His mouth opened, then closed again. "She's not a bad person," he said weakly. "Maybe not, but she treated me badly." "And you let her." "I didn't mean to." "You didn't not mean to either." He looked up, finally meeting my eyes. "I want to fix this." "No," I said quietly. "You want to feel better." "That's not fair." "It's honest." He stood there, the wind tugging lightly at his coat, the paper bag rustling. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. I'm clear. That's worse for you, I know. He didn't argue. I stepped back, just enough to make a point. If you want to talk, really talk, it won't be today. Not like this. Not with lemon bars and an apology rehearsed in the car. He nodded, barely. But you don't live here anymore, Alex, and you don't get to show up like you do. I understand. I hope you do. He turned to leave. I didn't stop him. The lemon bars sat on the porch for another hour before I brought them in. I didn't throw them out, but I didn't eat them either. The next morning, I woke before the sun. Not out of worry, not from noise. Just ease. A quiet kind of rest I hadn't known in months, maybe years. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea, steam rising in gentle spirals, and listened to the sounds I used to take for granted. The tick of the wall clock, the furnace kicking in, a bird tapping against the window, confused by its reflection. I breathed. Then I got to work. Not in a frenzy, not the kind of cleaning people do when they're trying to erase something painful. This was slower, intentional, one drawer at a time, one cupboard, one closet. In the back of the hallway shelf, I found my old address book again. Names crossed out. Birthdays circled. A page with Jack's handwriting, just a note that said, "Don't forget, Nance. License tabs due April." It was dated 1997. I kept it. By noon, the house felt less like a place someone had invaded and more like an old coat I'd finally slipped back into. Still worn in all the best places. Still mine. The doorbell rang around 1. Not Alex. A delivery driver. Large box. No return address I recognized. I signed and brought it inside. Inside was a white envelope and a single note. "I'm sorry. S." The box held 2 things. First, the Afghan I'd crocheted 3 winters ago. She'd taken it with her, claimed it fit her decor better. Now it was folded neatly, smelling faintly of her citrus detergent. Second, a framed photo of me and Alex from when he was maybe 10. Disneyland. I was wearing a sun visor. He was missing a tooth. We both looked sunburnt and happy. I sat down on the couch and stared at the photo. I didn't cry. I didn't forgive either, but I acknowledged the effort. That mattered. I called Clara that evening, told her about the delivery. "She's trying to make peace," Clara said. "She's trying to rewrite the ending." "Well," Clara said, "you're the one holding the pen." That night, I started drafting my new will, not out of spite, out of clarity. The house stays with me. It always did. But now it stays in writing, protected from sweet words and slow betrayals, the kind that come not with fists, but with silence and erasure. I didn't cut Alex out. I'm not made of ice. But I changed the terms. The house is no longer something he's entitled to. It's something he may be offered, if he shows he understands what it meant to me. If not, it will go elsewhere. Maybe to the shelter I volunteer at. Maybe to the church that helped Clara through her sister's illness. Maybe to someone who sees it for what it is, a place built on love, not entitlement. Howard, my lawyer, supported the changes. "You'd be surprised," he said, looking over the papers. "Most people wait until it's too late to reclaim their lives. I waited long enough," I said. He nodded. "You want to include a letter?" "No," I said. "I think they've heard enough from me." The next few days passed without incident. No calls, no knocks, just silence. But it was a different kind now. Not tense, not bitter, just clean. I found myself humming while sweeping the porch. I caught the light better in the mirror when I put my earrings in. I even went out to the garden and trimmed the hydrangeas the way I used to before someone else told me I was doing it wrong. A neighbor waved. "You're out early." "Trying to beat the frost," I said. He smiled. "Glad to see you around more." So was I. The freedom didn't feel loud or flashy. It wasn't a parade. It was a quiet yes in my chest, a stillness in my bones. That night, I sat on the porch with a book. The sun dipped behind the roof lines. I pulled the Afghan over my knees, mine again, and turned the pages slowly. At one point, I looked up, just in time to see a car slow in front of the house. Alex's. He didn't stop, didn't park, just looked. I looked back, and then I turned the page. I didn't hear from him for a week after that drive-by. Not a text, not a call. No soft knocking at the door pretending it was all a misunderstanding. I knew he saw me. I saw the way his eyes flicked to the porch, just long enough to register I was there before he looked away. Like someone checking a window for rain and pretending they're not already soaked. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't chase. And he didn't come back. I wish I could say I didn't think about it, but I did. Late at night, when the house got too quiet, when I'd pour myself a second cup of tea just to hold something warm, I'd wonder if he regretted it, if he saw how far off the path he'd wandered, if he knew how long it would take to walk back. But every time I caught myself hoping, I'd remember the sound of my own key failing in the lock, the cold metal, the way the door stood firm against me, like a stranger's back. That was what they gave me. And I couldn't forget it just because he might finally be sorry. Howard sent the finalized documents on a Thursday. Heavy envelope. Clean lines. My name, clear and centered. I opened it on the kitchen table, just like I'd once opened birthday cards and baby books and property tax notices. It felt different, not heavy, solid. The house was now protected by every letter of the law, not just sentiment, not just assumption. I'd made sure of it. I signed the final pages, slid them back into the prepaid envelope, and sealed it shut. When I dropped it into the mailbox, I felt no triumph, just steadiness, like locking a door before bed. Routine, essential, done. Saturday morning, the phone rang, the landline. No one uses that line anymore except the doctor's office and political volunteers around election season. But it was Alex. His voice was careful. "Hi, Mom." "Hello?" "I was wondering if we could sit down, just the two of us." "About what?" He hesitated. "Everything." I let that hang a moment. Then I said, "You can come Sunday, at 3, 1 hour." "You're serious?" "I'm clear." He paused again. "Thank you." I hung up before he could say anything else. Sunday came brisk and gray. I baked cornbread, not for him, for me. I always make cornbread when I need to feel grounded. The smell of it reminds me of autumns when Jack used to bring in damp firewood and leave wet footprints by the back door. At 2:55, I made tea. At 3:02, he knocked. I didn't make him wait. He stepped inside like a man unsure of his welcome, not just cautious, soft, shoulders drawn in, hands empty, eyes tired. "Can I sit?" I nodded toward the armchair, not the couch. He caught that. We sat in silence for a moment, just long enough for the clock in the hallway to chime 1/2 the hour. "I've been thinking," he began. "That's good." He didn't smile. Everything that happened, it wasn't just her. I said nothing. She has strong ideas. She pushes. But I didn't stop her, and that's on me. I still said nothing. I let her talk me into things. Told myself it was easier. Told myself you'd forgive it. I looked at him then. Really looked. Not at the boy I raised. Not at the teenager who slammed doors. Not at the man in a rented tuxedo on his wedding day. Just him. As he was. Flawed. Faltering. Maybe finally honest. I didn't want to need your house, he said. I felt embarrassed, like I failed. And so you tried to erase the reminder that it was mine. He winced. I didn't think of it that way. No, I said. You didn't think at all. Another long pause. I want to fix things, he said. Fix? I asked quietly. Or smooth over? He closed his eyes for a second. You're right to be angry. I'm not angry. His brow furrowed. I was, I said. But that's past. Now I'm simply done letting other people set the terms of my peace. He nodded slowly. I sipped my tea. You changed the will, didn't you? I met his eyes. Yes. He swallowed. Did you cut me out? No. But I changed what's automatic. From now on, anything you inherit from me will be based on the relationship we build, not the one we keep pretending is still intact. His face colored, but he didn't argue. I won't live another 10 years hoping for a son who remembers where he came from, I said. If you want to be part of my life again, it starts with truth and boundaries. He looked like he wanted to say something. I waited. I think I forgot who you were, he said softly. No, I replied. You assumed I'd forget who I was. The hour passed. When he stood to leave, he looked around the room like he was trying to memorize it. I don't know if I deserve your trust again. You don't, I said. But you'll let me earn it? That's up to you. He opened the door. I'll call soon? If you mean it, I said. And I closed the door after him. This time, not as an end. But as a beginning, I didn't need to rush. A week passed. Then 2. No calls. I didn't wait by the phone. I'm too old for that kind of theater. But I noticed. The absence. The silence. This time it didn't sting. It just confirmed what I already knew. When people are used to taking, the offer to rebuild feels too much like work. So I lived. I trimmed the hedges, cleaned out the hall closet, sent Clara a box of old scarves I no longer wore, with a note that read, "Too much neck for one woman." She called, laughing. I watched the birds return to the feeder outside the kitchen window, read library books in the afternoon sun. One morning, I even baked cookies just because I felt like it. Not for guests, not for company, just because the smell felt like home. It's strange how space shifts when you're no longer bracing for someone else's disapproval. The rooms opened up again, not wider, just truer, like they'd been holding their breath, same as me. On the 3rd week, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address, but the penmanship told me all I needed. Alex always pressed too hard with the pen, like he didn't trust the ink to stick unless he forced it. I held the envelope for a minute before opening it. Inside, 3 short paragraphs. Mom, you were right. I let her reshape everything. My words, my silence, even how I saw you. I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just hiding behind it. I'm not writing this to fix things. I know I've got work to do. But I needed you to know I see it now. All of it. I miss the sound of your voice when you read the paper. I miss Sunday mornings. I miss home. If there's a way back, even slowly, I'll walk it. If not, I understand. Alex. I read it twice. Then a 3rd time. Not because it moved me, not yet, but because it surprised me. Honesty, finally, without dressing. No flowers, no requests. Just what needed saying. I didn't reply. Not that day. I let the letter sit on the table under my sugar jar like a bookmark, let it soak into the walls. The next day, I went to the bank. Miriam, my account manager, met me in her usual pale blouse and gray sweater, the kind of neatness that comes from habit, not vanity. "You want to finalize the beneficiary structure today?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "and remove a few automatic authorizations." She nodded, typing briskly. We went over everything, line by line, number by number. My modest retirement fund, the house, the small insurance policy I'd kept active all these years. Nothing extravagant, but enough. "I've added language to protect the estate from any dispute," she said, clicking a few more times. "No joint access. No ambiguity." "Good," I said. When we finished, she printed the documents, watched me sign. "May I ask," she said gently, "are you doing this because of a conflict?" "No," I said. "I'm doing this because I'm done being the only adult in the room." She smiled. "We don't hear that one often." "I bet you don't." That afternoon, I walked home slower than usual, stopping to admire the last few leaves clinging to the ash trees. It was almost Thanksgiving. Cold had crept into the corners of everything, but it wasn't cruel, just honest. Like the air knew what came next and wasn't pretending otherwise. At home, I set the letter back on the kitchen table, read it once more. Then I wrote one of my own. Not a reply, a declaration. To whom it may concern, this house is not a prize. It is not a transaction. It is not a placeholder until something better comes along. It is not a second chance to rewrite someone else's story. This house is my life in walls. It's the mornings I watched my son learn to pour cereal. It's the nights I sat beside my husband while his breathing changed. It's the floor I swept with tired hands and the door I painted twice with a brush that kept shedding bristles. If you are reading this because I am gone, know that what you stand in is not just wood and wiring. It is memory. It is love that was tested and survived. And if you are reading this because I have chosen not to let you back in, know that it was not anger that closed the door. It was clarity. Nancy Tanner. I sealed the note and tucked it into the folder with the deed. Let it rest there, beside the rest of my life, quiet and unshakable. The wind picked up outside. I made soup. Turned on the porch light, even though no one was expected. The door stayed locked, but my heart did not. Thanksgiving came and went without a knock. Not from Alex, not from Celeste, not from anyone who once called this house theirs. And I'll tell you something, it was fine. No turkey, no folding chairs brought up from the basement. Just me and a warm squash stew, cornbread in the oven, and a slice of apple pie that I bought, not baked, because I didn't owe anyone effort that cost me joy. I set the table anyway. One place, candle lit, napkin folded, not out of loneliness, but out of respect. For myself, for the years, for the woman I had finally remembered how to be. I toasted Jack with my tea. "To peace," I said aloud. "Finally earned." The wind answered by rattling the window just enough to make me smile. The next morning, the mail brought something unexpected. Not a letter. A package. Small, brown. No return name, but the postage read, Chicago. Celeste's hometown. I opened it in the kitchen, standing over the sink, not sure what I expected. Inside was a small blue velvet pouch, and inside that, a locket. Gold-plated, delicate. The kind you buy for sentiment more than value. I opened it carefully. One side held a photo, me, much younger, holding Alex on my hip, both of us laughing at something out of frame. The other side was blank. No note, no message, just the locket. I closed it and set it on the table, next to the sugar jar, where Alex's letter still rested. I didn't cry, but I sat with it. Because that's the thing with gestures. They're only worth as much as what follows. And silence, no matter how pretty, isn't the same as change. That afternoon, I decided to walk to the lake. It was colder than I expected, wind needling through my coat, but I didn't turn back. The path was covered in leaves and silence, and that suited me. I sat on the bench where Jack and I used to bring Alex when he was small. I remember him chasing geese, falling into the mud, laughing like the world would never turn hard. I thought about what it meant to be someone's mother, what it cost, what it gave, and what it could no longer excuse. When I got home, I checked the porch out of habit. Empty, still, and I liked it that way. Inside, I found the house exactly as I left it. Nothing touched, nothing moved, and that meant everything. The next day, Clara called. "I keep thinking about what you said," she began. "About peace you have to fight for." I smiled into the receiver. "It's a strange kind of battle." "Well," she said, "I'm ready for mine." She told me she'd drawn new lines with her daughter. Finally said no to one more favor that always ended in debt. It wasn't dramatic, she said, just different, firmer. "I learned from the best," she added. "Oh, stop it." "No, really. You taught me that standing up doesn't have to be loud, just clear." We talked another hour about movies, old neighbors, her plans to repaint her kitchen. When we hung up, I sat for a while and watched the light move across the floor. Slow, patient, like it knew it was welcome now. That evening, I went to the drawer where I kept old letters and photos. I took out one picture, Alex at 12 standing in the driveway with his first bike, and slipped it into the blank side of the locket. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. Maybe someday, when he was ready, I'd give it to him. And maybe not. Some things don't need to be passed down. Some things stay with the one who finally learned not to be erased. Later, I went outside and swept the porch, just as the streetlights came on. The neighborhood was quiet. Houses glowing from inside. You can tell a lot by the kind of light someone leaves on. I looked at mine. Soft, steady, enough. Not an invitation, just a sign. I'm still here. And I remember everything. It snowed last night. Not much, just enough to blanket the porch and soften the edges of the world. The kind of snow that makes everything quiet, even in a city. The kind that reminds you time keeps moving, no matter who stays, who leaves, or who finally learns what you've always known. I woke to the hush of it, the kind of silence that doesn't ask for permission. I made my tea, pulled the curtains back, and watched the world turn white. There was a single set of footprints on the walk. Not fresh, not expected. They led from the street to my front steps, then turned around. Whoever it was hadn't knocked. I didn't check the cameras. I don't have any. I believe if someone really needs to be let in, they'll wait. They'll try again. Not just come and go like memory. At noon, I bundled up and walked to the library. The girls there know me. Mrs. Tanner, large print section, always returns early. One of them handed me a wrapped parcel tied in twine. "Someone left this for you yesterday." I blinked. Left? Said it was important. The tag said only, "Nancy. Read this when you're ready." Inside was a book, A collection of essays. Not expensive. Well read. The spine had been opened wide, corners bent, notes scribbled in the margins. On the first page, in the top right corner, was handwriting I recognized. Alex's. I marked the ones that reminded me of you. I thought maybe if I couldn't find the right words myself, someone else already had. There was no signature, just that. I didn't open it. Not then. I tucked it under my arm and walked home through the snow. Back at the house, I put the kettle on, set the book beside the chair, sat for a long time just looking out the window, and then I opened it. One essay was circled twice. A mother's silence is not her consent. I sat back, the words rising up like breath after deep water. The phone rang just after dusk. Not a call I expected. Clara. I have a question, she said. And don't laugh. I'm listening. Do you want to go on a trip next spring? A trip? There's a train tour, national parks, seniors discount, you and me. No husbands, no children, no apologies. I smiled. You planning my escape? No. I'm inviting you to your own life. I laughed then, loud, easy. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long. That night, I lit a candle by the window, not for show. Not as a welcome, just a light. For myself. For the years I had left. For the woman I was before the silences and the boxes in the garage. If you've made it this far, you already know the lesson. It's not about locks or luggage or letters that come too late. It's about remembering you don't owe anyone your erasure. Not your child. Not their partner. Not the world that keeps asking you to shrink. You don't have to get angry. You don't have to yell. You just have to stop opening the door for those who never learned how to knock and light a candle instead. For peace. For clarity. For the self you never truly lost. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs it. Or leave a comment. I read them all, even if I don't always reply. We get braver together.